Okay, so as I said, okay, the matrix elements for this particular process, for this particular crosser process, beta decay is given by MFI is equal to some coupling constant G, UP bar, gamma mu, UN, then UE bar, gamma mu, U neutrino. Because the process is like, आपका यहाँ पे neutron है, this is a neutrino, and here it is proton, here it is electron. This is leptonic current, and this is the hadronic current. Okay, so where G is the weak coupling constant, as I said. Okay, now if you look from जो four bispinals हमारे पास है, from four four component bispinals जो हैं, from four bispinals, that is four fermions involved. Just 1 second. Uh, Hello, sorry. Okay, so I was saying that from four bispinals, that is four fermions involved. What are the four fermions? Neutron, proton, electron, and neutrino. So we from these four protons and using this matrix elements, we can actually construct 256 linearly independent types of interactions. That means very huge. 256 linearly independent interactions. Yani from these bispinal, when I'm going to use them into this particular equation from the matrix elements, I will get 256 linear types of the interaction. That means these types of these much of the interactions or the equations. However, when we will impose the Lorentz invariance, however, the imposition of Lorentz transformation, Lorentz invariance, imposition of Lorentz invariance reduces this number, and instead of 256, reduces this number to only 5 covariant, 5 covariant types of interactions. So instead of this 256 linearly type of interactions, when I will impose the Lorentz invariance or Lorentz contraction, you know what I mean by the Lorentz invariance. That is, the rest of the way they will not remain the invariant in the Lorentz transformation. There will be only 5 covariant types of interaction which will remain invariant under this Lorentz covariance. So I will consider only those 5 out of these 256 linearly independent interactions. So what are those interactions? Now this is the important part of the lecture. So this is, first of all, the first one is what we call as a scalar interaction. Scalar interaction. So I represent it by the symbol S, and this is given by psi bar psi. So in this particular case, for the scalar interaction, the selection rule delta J to angular momentum is 0. Yani the angular momentum before and after will remain the same. Delta J is 0, and here no parity change. The parity will not change. No parity change. Now parity आपने detail में पढ़ा होगा in the first unit. The parity will not change. And this psi bar जो आपका है in scalar interaction, this will transform as a scalar under this Lorentz transformation. Lorentz transformation. And under the parity transformation. This is one thing. Okay. Now the second thing is the second interaction after the scalar interaction is that is what we call as a vector interaction. And we represent it by the V symbol. This is given by psi bar this gamma mu psi. Okay, again here this delta selection of delta J is 0, but here the parity will change. Parity changes in this case in the vector interaction. Okay, so this psi bar gamma mu psi will transform as a vector. Transform transforms as a vector under this Lorentz transformation and changes, and it will change sign under parity transformation, whereas in the scalar it doesn't change sign under the parity transformation. Parity transformation. Okay, now coming to the third one, these are the interaction which we remain there using considering all these bisplanars and the gamma matrices into the consideration. So out of those four, I am talking about those five. Then after the vector interaction, we have the tensor interaction. Tensor interaction, represent it by T symbol, and this is given by some I psi bar gamma mu psi, gamma nu psi, is equal to psi bar some sigma mu nu psi. Okay, here delta J, the selection rule, it could be either 0 or plus minus 1, and again no parity change in this case. No parity change. So psi bar gamma se gamma mu, so it will change, it will remain invariant of the Lorentz transformation, and it will not remain, and also under the parity transformation. So tensor interaction. Then we have the another four, that is axial vector interaction. Axial vector interaction. Axial vector interaction kya hai? So it is represented by A and is given by I psi bar gamma 5 component, yes, 5 gamma mu and psi. Okay, here delta J is 0 or plus minus 1, and again no parity change. No parity change. No parity change. Then we have the fifth one, that is what we call as a pseudo-scalar interaction. Pseudo-scalar interaction. Pseudo-scalar interaction mein kya hai? We represent it by P, and it's like psi bar gamma 5 psi. Okay. Here delta J is 0 from the selection rule, and the parity will change again. The parity changes. You have to remember all these interactions for this particular case. So this psi bar gamma 5 psi will transform as, you have to remember that it will transform as a scalar under Lorentz transformation, but changes sign under parity transformation. Parity transformation. Now if you look at the first case जो मैंने यहाँ पे कहा था, that will transform as a scalar, this will transform as a scalar, and the both under the parity transformation. But here it will transform as a scalar but will change sign under the parity transformation, but will not, but yes, kaha, अच्छा ये parity changes, but the sign, but the parity, it will change the sign under the parity. Okay, now considering all these five interactions into the consideration, so I will write down the perturbation operator in terms of all these. So the perturbation operator H dash in case of the beta decay may be represented by, so I will write down this perturbation operator H dash, some summation, this I running from 1 to 5, yani from 1 to 5, these all these interactions, Ci H dash. So the perturbation operator can be written in terms of all these interactions, where the summation runs over all these were the five components जो हमारे पास जो मैंने अभी just mention किए हैं. ठीक है? Now each of these transitions actually जो है, either we will talk about the first one is scalar, Then next one is vector. Then there is tensor. Then there is axial vector, axial vector. Then there is pseudo scalar, pseudo scalar. Now each of these transitions, each of these interactions, actually जो है, they are actually characterized by their own selection rules for allowed transitions. It means under what circumstances they are allowed, what are the possible selection rules under which they will be allowed to, you know, what are the allowed transitions for such processes. They are actually, they are characterized by their own transition rules. I don't know whether you have learned about these selection rules. The one of the selection rule is what we call as a Fermi selection rule. If you have not Fermi selection rule, if you are not known about these things, they are separate topics. We will discuss this Fermi selection rule, and then there is Gamow-Taylor selection rule. Gamow-Taylor selection rule. Have you heard about this or not? These two interactions, yani these interactions, these transitions, scalar, vector, tensor, axial and pseudo scalar transitions, they are characterized by their own selection rules. Now for example, जो scalar और vector हैं, these two scalar and vector versions, allowed transitions जो इसमें हैं, allowed transitions in these two cases, allowed transitions are determined by this Fermi selection rule. Fermi selection rule. Whereas for tensor and the axial vector, for these, the allowed transitions जो हैं, the allowed transitions are determined by allowed transitions are determined by this Gamow-Taylor, जो मैंने यहाँ पे लिखा है, Gamow-Taylor selection rule, Gamow-Taylor selection rule. Whereas for this pseudo scalar जो आपका है, the pseudo scalar जो है is not suitable for describing allowed transitions. This pseudo scalar process is not suitable for describing the allowed transition, जो मतलब हमारे पास possible transitions यहाँ पे हैं, because in this case only such transitions are possible for which delta J is 0 and the parity changes. So this is not again considered into this whole process. So here what I will put instead of Ci, so I can take the values like S, V, T, A and P. So I will say that Ci is equal to Cp is equal to 0. So for this particular case, Cp is equal to 0. So Cp, Ci, they are actually the allowed transitions for all these processes. Okay. So here, so then हमारे पास अब क्या रहा? For we need to find only. So we need to find only, एक तो आपका CS है, scalar transition, then there is CV vector, then CT and CA, all these, because CP is 0, so we need to find out these things only. Okay, now the contribution of these four significant interactions, this scalar interaction, vector interaction, tensor interaction and the axial interaction, actually are stated by measuring the angular correlation between the electron and the recoil nucleus. So we are actually studying these interactions. These interactions, either we have the scalar interaction, vector interaction, tensor interaction, or the scalar interaction. They are actually studied by measuring the angular correlation. What is the angular correlation between the electron and a recoiling nucleus? So what are the four possible scenarios corresponding to this S, V, T and A? So they are, I will just try to go to that particular thing. For example, for the first case, that means these interactions are studied by considering the angular interaction or the angular correlation between what? Between the electron and the recoiling nucleus. For example, for the first case, S is equal to Z, S for the scalar case, that is S, जहाँ पे मैंने कहा delta J is equal to 0. Okay, so what is the process looks like? It's like this. This is an electron. As I said, this is studied in terms of the angular correlation between the recoil nucleus and the electron. So this is an electron here, and this is neutrino, anti-neutrino. Okay, this goes like this, and it is it's what we call as a right-handed electron. Right-handed electron. This gives the angular correlation. This is this here. This is low energy recoil. Low energy recoil nucleus. Recoil. Low energy nucleus. Recoil. Okay. This is for. I will just write down the first all the four. Then I will just explain what I mean. Now for a scalar. उसके बाद हमारे पास वेक्टर है जहां पे आपका डेल्टा J अगेन 0 है and the angular correlation between the electron and the recoil nucleus is like this. This is your electron here, and this is your neutrino, electron neutrino. This is electron, and it's like this. It goes like this. This is, we call this as a high energy recoil. High energy recoil. High energy recoil. Sorry, this is like this. यहाँ पे arrow ऐसे high energy recoil. Okay, so this is what we call as a left-handed electron. Left-handed electron. Similarly, I have the third one, which is called as a tensor. So I will consider here this delta J equal to 1. Okay, again, the figure is very much similar to the this one. So this is again electron here. This is electron neutrino. This is electron. This is the high energy recoil. This is high energy recoil. Okay, but here in case of the tensor, this is like this becomes the right-handed electron. Right-handed electron. Now finally the fourth one जो हमारे पास axial है, this is delta J is equal to 1, and this is again low energy recoil. Low energy recoil. This is now electron neutrino again, and here this is what is electron, and it's again इसका जो है this is उल्टा left-handed electron. Left-handed electron. Fine. Now this is actually what has been observed from these things, from this theory. Now this actually gives you the angular correlation. Actually this has been obtained from all these interactions. Yani we just study the angular correlation between the this nucleus as well as the electron. So here for the scalar case, the angular correlation is given by this. For the vector, the angular correlation is given by this. Yani the electron here is a left-handed electron, and you know what I mean by the left-handed and the right-handed electron. This is in the very first unit we are actually given neutrinos जब हम कहते हैं helicity of a neutrino and all the left-handed and right-handed. Yani when the spin is opposite to the to their momentum. Okay. Okay, so this is this angular correlation from this particular theory. So this gives you the from the low energy recoil. This is a right-handed electron here. So for the two cases, we have the right-handed electron. For the scalar case and for the tensor case, we have the right-handed electron. Whereas for the scale this vector as well as for this axial vector action, we have the left-handed electron. So it is clear from all these correlations from this particular theory that S and P interactions will predict the right-handed electron, whereas V and A interactions will predict the left-handed electron. Okay. Now this is a theory, as I said, VA theory. Now the experimental observations reveal that the predominance of this V and A interactions, A versions of the interactions. Then experimentally, it has been found that the electrons from this beta decay, they have this left-handed versions of the they have the left-handed, they are actually the left-handed, not the right-handed. Hence we called this theory as the VA. So that's why I told you, I will tell you at the end what I mean by the VA. So that's why we called this as theory of weak interactions. VA theory of weak interactions. So because the vector as well and the axial vector will predict the left-handed electron, and this has been observed experimentally that the electrons here will be the left-handed electrons from this particular theory. So that's why we call it this particular theory, and this theory has been verified successfully by the experiment. That's why it's a very successful theory to understand these weak interactions. That is why we called this as a VA theory of weak interactions. Okay. Now you know that one thing जो है, you know the vector जो आपका है, this changes sign here. The vector changes sign when rotated through what? When rotated through 180 degree. It will change sign. Obviously, ये vector है. It will, अगर मैं इसको rotate करूँ 180, it will change sign. Either it was in this direction and this is this. Now, what is axial vector? Axial vector में भी आपने पहली बार सुना होगा. This axial vector, like vector under rotation, it is like vector. You have to remember this. This axial vector is like a vector under rotation, but opposite sign. But इसका जो sign है, opposite sign to vector under parity transformation. Parity transformation. That is why we call this as an axial vector. Yani it will rotate like a vector under the rotation. जैसे आपका normal vector होता है आपके, when it rotates under a rotation, it will transform है. But when it comes to the parity transformation, अगर vector का sign +1 से -1 हो रहा है, but जो axial vector होगा, its sign will be opposite to that. It will be opposite to that of a vector under the parity transformation. That is what makes it different from a normal vector. Okay. So this another thing, one important thing, this VA theory was actually proven by many experiments at that time. ठीक है, ये जो VA theory of weak interactions है, it was proven by many experiments at that time, such that for example in a particular case, by the fact that you know that the neutrino जो है, they have the they are left-handed. ठीक है, because the neutrino is considered to be the left-handed. What I mean by the left-handed, that means its spin is antiparallel to its momentum. अगर फॉर एग्जाम्पल न्यूट्रिनो है, दिस इज द मोमेंटम, इट्स स्पिन जो इस न्यूट्रिनो का है, इट विल बी एंटीपैरेलल टू इट्स मोमेंटम. दैट इज व्हाट आई मीन बाय द लेफ्ट हैंडेड. सो दिस एक्चुअली दिस particular theory was the experiment this theory was proved experimentally by the case then the neutrino is a left-handed, is simply a left-handed. Yani neutrino is considered to be as a left-handed. So that is right about the VA theory of weak interaction. It's not that easy to understand. I know that. So there are so many things to discuss about the. That's why I told you if you had some the questions or the queries regarding this particular, we will discuss this at the end. But it's not like that treatment. This is considered to be the very important theory. And also it's you need to have some knowledge about very good knowledge of the quantum mechanics and other things in order to understand this VA theory of thing, because we are actually using the quantum mechanical treatments. Okay, so these matrix elements, how we write down these matrix elements and all those things. So now if you had to
इतना ही पढ़ेंगे.